Hello and welcome to the We Are Makers podcast. We're Kate and Jack Lenny, a husband and wife team, sharing the stories of makers from around the world. We travel to the makers' workshops, studios and sheds to bring you honest conversations with the people behind the craft, right where the making happens. This podcast is an extension of our quarterly print magazine, our original project born in 2020 from a love of craft and the need to champion makers beyond the digital world. This podcast is a true labour of love, and if you enjoy what we do, there's a few ways in which you can support us. First, subscribe to our quarterly magazine. It's beautifully printed and delivered straight to your door every February, May, August and November, and it's what makes everything we do possible. You can also follow this podcast, leave a review, or if you fancy, buy us a coffee to help us going on those long travel days. Whether you're listening with a coffee in hand or busy making at your bench, let's dive into today's episode.
Finally here, Will.
Yeah.
How long have we known you on the internet? How long have we been internet friends?
2 years.
Yeah.
There you go. Maybe.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, I stumbled upon you guys. So I mentioned Shay Alexander, Alexander Brothers. I saw that he had liked something of yours and I said, that sounds interesting. And I looked into what you were doing. I'm like, oh.
Who are these strange people spending all their money printing a magazine in a world that nobody buys magazines?
Well, that's not true.
That is not true, you're absolutely right.
Not these days.
I need to find out more about them.
Yeah, there you go.
Here we are.
I know,
Quite.
now we're here. We're visited in Vermont. It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
That is stunning.
Yeah.
It's the furthest up in the US we've ever been.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. it is.
Furthest north?
Yeah, by a long way.
Yeah, we're just
By a
basically
long,
on the
long way.
southwest.
Boston was, until New Hampshire yesterday, Boston was the furthest up we'd ever been.
Well,
We've never been to Canada. I've been to Canada, but you've never been to Canada.
No.
Been to Canada a long time ago.
it's not far.
No. Where are we and who are we with?
So we are in Barrie, Vermont, and I am Will Adams, and this is Honey Brook Tools and Woodworks.
Yeah.
What is Honey Brook Tools and Woodworks?
So what is Honey Brook Tools and Woodworks?
Other than your dream come true.
Yeah, aside from my dream come true. Well, this is the result of a career pivot after being an elementary school teacher for about a decade. And without getting into all the details, it got to the point where I was understanding that it was no longer healthy for me to be doing that. It was just the stress, the emotional wear, the physical wear, and even spiritual wear on me was just, I couldn't do it anymore. And my wife, Joanne, she was a teacher too. She retired recently. We were on kind of a 2 or 3 year retirement path. And it got to the point where I just said, I got to do something different. So I left. And I had kind of a vague idea that I might be able to do something in the wood shop. I mean, this was my hobby. This was my hobby space. And this was kind of my regenerate my battery space. And I had a little bit of concern about turning my passion into work. But
Valid concern.
yeah, but so when I left teaching, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I was kind of rudderless. I'd just gone through a knee replacement, so I was having some medical issues, and I literally turned to a wood lathe for kind of therapy. Before this, I had an old Delta belt drive lathe that I'd bought a couple months prior. I'd never turned before in my life, and it was just something I wanted to do. And it turned into just really great therapy for me as I was trying to figure out, what's my next step. And through social media and what have you, I mean, the maker community, it's everywhere. And I started connecting with woodworkers and other turners and other tool makers. And it started out just kind of fooling around on the lathe, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I made a couple of handles for files and what have you. And
Just for yourself?
just for myself, yeah. And then I figured, well, maybe I bet I could make a knife. I mean, I don't have the blades, but I could probably find them. And I did that. And then I started putting them up on this Facebook.
These are your marking knives that we looked at earlier.
Yeah. There's a Facebook group called the Can I Have It Vintage Tool auction and sale group, and their deal is through the week you can post things for buy it now, and then on the weekends it's an auction.
Right.
And I showed a couple people what I was doing, and they said, "Hey, you should put some of those up there." I said, "I don't know," and I did. And looking back on what I was making at the time, they were, I think they're pretty comic, but it was a starting point, and I kept some of the originals. I think it's important to remember where you came from, kind of what your start is. And from there, I found that I needed to kind of differentiate myself from other people, so I started making winding sticks. There are very few people that make them. It's one of those tools that a woodworker can make for themselves, but if you're a hobby woodworker and you've got limited time on the weekend, you want to work on your project, you don't necessarily want to make your tools. So there's that market for it.
And presumably with winding sticks, and you should explain what winding sticks are as well too, they're kind of a lost tool on account of most lumber comes dimensionally accurate now if you buy it from a shop, right?
A lot of it does, yeah. So winding sticks are these are rough outs of some that are in process. So they're they're dimensionally identical. And the idea is if you've got a board that has, or if you want to check a board, even if it's just come off the lumber yard and you think that it's perfectly, twist free or whatever, these will help you to know if there's any twist in the board. So the way it works, when this is finished, it'll have a sighting inlay up here in a contrasting color, and then two like little cat's eye sighting inlays, and you put one on one end of the board and one on the further end of the board, and then you sight over the top of them. And because these are typically wider than the board that you're using, it's going to accentuate any twist. The idea is you want to line up the top of the two winding sticks, and once they're lined up, you don't have any twist in your board anymore. Very handy, and it
very handy if you're trying to take twist out of, say, something that's 1 inch by 1 inch or 2 inch by 2 inch, because that's a really difficult twist to see along its length, right? Yeah. And especially the longer the board as well, the more accentuation you can get, presumably the better.
Exactly, and it tells you. A lot of my customers are. My sense is that they're primarily hand tool woodworkers. So if you're going to flatten a board by hand with a hand plane, these are pretty imperative. It makes your life a lot easier knowing where you have to plane. From there, where did I go from there? Then I started making marking gauges, awls. And part of the thing about me as a maker is I'm endlessly curious. I always have a desire to learn more about what I'm doing. So I branched out into, I've got machining tools in the shop. I am not a machinist. I am a woodworker that has machining tools, and I use them to the best of my ability. But I use them I make plain iron adjusting hammers with a little brass head. Sliding bevels, and I make all the brass parts for those because I found that any of the parts that were available commercially, I just didn't like the fit and finish of them, and they looked too contemporary.
Well, if you can make them yourself, why not?
Exactly. Does it take more time? Yes. Is it worth it? I think so.
Yeah.
Because when you look at one of my marking gauges, one of my sliding bevels or my marking gauges, they are readily reminiscent of classic design, and that's just kind of what my aesthetic is. I like simple forms. I like the wood to speak for itself. Some people have asked me, I make winding sticks in a lot of different kinds of woods. Biggest sellers are like tiger maple, walnut, but I've also made them in some exotic woods. I used to make them out of rosewood, but I unfortunately developed an allergic sensitivity to it, so I can't use it anymore.
That's not uncommon, is it?
No.
I've heard a couple of woodworkers, specifically one, we featured him. His name escapes me, and I remember reading it. I know he's on the West Coast, Washington area, and he just got his business to a real profitable state and developed an allergy to wood dust.
Yeah. So and some of them, like the rosewoods, are what they call sensitizers. So once you develop the allergy to it, it makes you more sensitive to other woods that are potentially allergic. So I just stopped working with it.
Yeah.
And I, like some curly cherry and just beautiful wood. And I had somebody comment one time on a social media post, asked, those are beautiful, but why do you need something that fancy? And my answer to that is simple. I think we're inspired by the tools that we make. If you're surrounded by things that are beautiful, or if you're surrounded by tools that inspire you, I think it's going to inspire you to make better work.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why. And again, I don't do a lot in terms of the finishing. I'll apply oil to them, but my go-to finish is just a ultra blonde shellac.
Yeah.
Let the wood do
So
the talking.
how long ago did you start this?
3 years ago this March.
It's been quite a productive 3 years, hasn't it?
It has been a very productive 3 years. Yeah. And, one thing that I have found is I've had a lot of hobbies in my life, but there is no community that is more supportive than the woodworking community. I mean, there are very few people out there that are jealous of their information or unwilling to help you. And that has been, I think that's been one of the best from just kind of a human standpoint. It's a great community. So very encouraging.
Yeah, as someone who's self-admittedly has had a lot of hobbies, is it the community side of it that's made this one stick?
I think so.
Yeah.
And well, yes and no. I fell in love with wood at a very young age. Right. So I grew up in southern Connecticut, colonial town, and I just remember it like as an elementary school student, being really interested in the history of the town, the colonial era, and when other kids were reading comic books, I was going to the library trying to find books about colonial furniture.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm like, man, I would love to make that. Yeah. And then
even at a very young age, you knew you wanted it.
Yeah. But I was, on the other hand, my father was a music teacher. He taught band in the local school system, and I was a musician. That was my creative outlet. Mm-hmm. Even started college as a performance major. Wow. But I just kept coming back to me. And when I got to junior high school and we finally got to take wood shop and metal shop, that's when I said, someday I've got to have a wood shop. Yeah. And, like a lot of people, you graduate college, you get a job, you get a career, and, the way work life is scheduled, mm-hmm. there's not always time for those passions, and they fall by the wayside. And for years, I knew I was missing something. I said that I started my college career out as a music performance major. And at some point, the idea of being a musician full-time as a performer, as my business, that killed the passion for me. And I thought, do I really want to do this? I was a French horn player. I could have probably made a living at it. I mean, I don't want to toot my own horn, so to speak, but I was good.
Yeah.
But there was also in the town that I grew up in, it was a fairly affluent town, where job titles, status, careers, colleges that you went to were very important. And nobody ever said anything to me, but it was always, I always kind of felt like I got to do something else, you know? And I remember having the thought when I was in music school, you know, do I just want to be playing in an orchestra somewhere? Which was, at 21, it made sense, or however old I was, 18, 19. Looking back on it, it's an absolutely insane thought.
Yeah.
You know, what better way could you make a living than creating beauty for other people?
Yeah, quite.
And so I completely did a 180. Left music school, went to a small college here, military college in Vermont. Got a degree in political science, and right out of college, I started working for one of our U.S. senators, then ended up as a lobbyist in our state legislature. And it was intellectually appealing to me, but it wasn't a healthy place for me to be. I was attracted to the power and kind of the influence and all that. But if I'm honest, the creator in me was still
there somewhere.
It was still there somewhere. Yeah. I'll be very honest. I turned to alcohol as my crutch, and it became a huge problem.
Yeah. And how old were you at this stage?
So we're talking 20s, 30s.
Okay.
57 now, and sober for 16 years.
Oh,
you know,
well done.
It got, and I think, I don't want to get into a conversation about addiction, but for me, it was the lack of connection. I didn't feel connected to people, and I didn't feel like, even though the work I was doing was intellectually stimulating, it wasn't scratching that creative itch.
Yeah.
Is that a story of being, because you're obviously surrounded by people in that job, but just not being surrounded by your people in that job?
Right. There was that. Despite how much we have talked this morning, I'm an introvert. You know, unless I'm surrounded by my people, as I forewarned you, I will talk forever about woodworking or anything that I'm passionate about. But, you know, even here in Vermont's a small state, even the politics in Vermont got to the point where I was finding that people weren't interested in solutions, they were just interested in power. And that was not appealing to me. And it wasn't a healthy place to be. It was competitive, and it just was not healthy. And then when I got sober, I did a career pivot, got my master's degree in education, became an elementary school teacher. Which again, as an introvert, you might think, well, that's kind of weird. But there was enough. Originally, I thought I was going to be a high school teacher, but I substitute taught like twice in high school. I'm like, this is not for me. Forget it. And I fell in love with elementary school, what the learning was. You know, there were opportunities to be creative with kids. And when I was teaching, I was always happiest when we were doing some kind of a project. Like when the classroom was complete chaos, and there was paper, and there were glue sticks, and there was paint, and we were making something in the service of their learning. Yeah, you know, they're demonstrating their learning through some kind of a creative process. That's when I was happy. But, you know, when I was monitoring, you know, standardized testing, and it's just...
I know, it gets boring. Yeah.
So, man, I don't know how we got off on that, but... you know, there's something about working with wood that is just really therapeutic to me, whether it's on the wood lathe, whether it's over on the bench, hand planing. I will, and any woodworker that watches this will understand exactly what I'm about to say. Last weekend, I had a couple little planes that I was restoring just to have some time in the shop. And then I, put a piece of pine in the vise and just started planing for no other reason than to plane, to create the shavings. And just, I mean, the sound the tactile feel that you get, the response you get from the wood. And pine is pretty easy to plane.
Yep.
But even the tougher woods, you get into this little dance of, okay, how do you want me to plane you? You're tearing out and this is not working. So how do you got to learn what the wood wants. And you got to learn which is the right tool to use. And I just find it endlessly satisfying.
Yeah.
What is it you find endlessly satisfying about it though? Is it the doing or is it the constant learning of it?
Yes.
Both.
Yes, both.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started doing this, I was using just, only domestic woods, which is fine. But, about a year ago through social media, actually it was 2 years ago, turned on to a fella over in Australia, and I bought some Australian woods from him. And that is a completely different beast.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very dense. The grains are really interlocking, and you really need to be listening to the wood to know what it wants. And there's just something wonderful about starting with something like this or something even rougher.
Yep.
And creating something out of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Every once in a while I'll go into the wood pile and I'll pull out a piece of firewood and I'll split it and say, I wonder what this might look like. Chuck it up on the lathe, start slow, and
See what
comes
see
out.
what happens.
Yeah.
Actually, the last time I did that, I made a mallet and I sent it to a friend of mine that I've met through social media who lives in Fife.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yeah. Fife in Scotland?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. That's not far from us at all.
Yeah.
The social media, and I want to get back onto woodworking in a minute, but we've mentioned it a few times, so it's worth mentioning the social media thing. Like, we talked about it earlier, actually, just as we came in. Like, you can really use it to your advantage.
You
Like,
can.
just from a community of people.
Right.
Because, I mean, you're out here in, backcountry Vermont, I think it's safe to say. It's a fair ways away from Fife, for example. Right?
Yeah.
You can really find a lot of people. And being, self-proclaimed introvert, has that helped keep you on the path for this?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because whether you're a woodworker in Fife or in Barre, Vermont, or Dallas, Texas, you're a woodworker. I mean, there's that common bond. You may approach it differently. I use machines. I use hand tools. I mean, I have to be efficient. Some people use only hand tools. That's great. Some people use only machines. That's great.
Yeah.
It's just not my deal. But the common bond is we're creating with wood.
Yep.
And I've got a decent number of customers that I've sold to in the UK. And there's something just extraordinarily satisfying about knowing that, a piece of pine, a piece of maple that I've turned here in Barre, Vermont,
Or somewhere else in the world.
is turning into a tool that's going to be in somebody's shop in the south coast of England.
Yeah. That's one of the highlights about the magazine for us, is when someone you never met before posts it, and like we've got a customer in Thailand and Japan and all over the US, all over the UK, or you see it in an airport lobby like we did on the way over here.
I saw that.
It's awesome,
know.
man. And then we just had friends who sent us it in another terminal in London, and it's really cool to know you've put something out into the world that's been appreciated by other people. And I think a lot of people are missing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of people.
Yeah. And, I'll tell you what, one of the first tools I ever made before I, as a hobbyist, should have brought it over here.
You can.
Go grab it. Oh. So when I first, I mentioned connection. So my family roots are in Kentucky. And to make a very long story short, this particular piece of walnut came off of a bureau that I pulled out of a storehouse on the farm
Okay.
that I thought I was going to restore.
Right.
I toted that thing around for 20 years. And when I
We know
finally,
someone like that.
Yeah.
when I finally got into trying to restore it, it was too far gone.
Yeah.
And the top though was solid walnut. So I made this handle, very rudimentary handle. In the knife blade, this is a straight razor that was my great-grandfather's.
Oh, cool.
That's cool.
So when I talk about connection, when I talk about the satisfaction of knowing that my tools are in somebody's shop in the UK, there's that connection, you know? I don't know that they'll always think this, but you know, I correspond with people enough that I like to think that, you know, when they pick up one of my knives, they'll think about the email exchanges that we've had, or the conversations that we've had. I've, you know, make custom tools for people, custom sets, and there's that connection again. And so, you know, every time I use this, it's a very utilitarian knife, but it's on my bench and I use it all the time. You know, I feel connection to my family.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
There's something about that, isn't there, as well? It's tools, because and I love this about Simone and Samoa in France. They're smiths, toolsmiths.
Yeah.
They made a lot of stuff for the Notre Dame renovation because they wanted to do it traditionally. So they made traditional tools, and they brought a bunch of other people together to make it happen. It wasn't just themselves, and they're very open about that. It's like, it's not just making the product, it's making the product that makes the product.
Yeah.
There's something, a little bit Inception about that I really like. Really, really like. So as someone who grew up looking at colonial furniture, why did you not just become a furniture maker? Why was it tools for you?
Why was it tools for me?
Or is colonial furniture next year's project?
Right. I wonder what my hobby is going to be when I stop doing this. You know, I think it was, I really took to turning.
Right.
You know, when I first started doing this, I'm like, wow, this is really cool. You know, because when I turn, I've got the dust extractor on, I've got my headphones, and it's just me and the wood. And there's the tactile feedback that you get, and I just love it. And so why didn't I make furniture? Well, you know, didn't know if I could, you know, make any money doing it. You know, brown furniture is not very popular now. You know, you look at antiques, you know, people are not buying it. People are accustomed to IKEA. And I just, that's the thing. I think there's a limited market for people who appreciate handmade furniture. But I think more than that, it wasn't a conscious decision. This just happened. You know, I can't say it any more clearly than that. I mean, I just started.
You sold a piece and you saw something in it and was like, I could do more of this.
Yeah, and people started. We were talking earlier about you get out of social media what you put into it. You know, and if you take the bait and go on, you know, down some ugly rabbit hole, you know, okay, you're going to get what you're looking for. But again, the woodworking community was so supportive. And I found, and particularly this was on the heels of, you know, just a couple years after the pandemic. And there were a lot of people that got into handwork, you know, while they had time on their hands. I don't know how many people have kept up with it. I hope they have. But
even if 1%'s kept up with it, it's still a net plus, right?
Yeah. I believe with every fiber of my being that humans are meant to make. You know, we are meant to do things with our hands. There's a reason that we have
opposable thumbs.
Exactly. So
there's a reason cats don't, because they're menaces.
Right, they're menaces.
It's a therapy for a lot of people, is making.
Yeah. I mean, just the satisfaction of coming in with a blank slate and then having something that's functional or just beautiful. So why tools? It just happened. you know, and I love tools. I mean, before I started doing this, I would buy and flip tools. I'd restore them and then sell them on. So, as you can see from the shop, I like old tools.
Yeah.
And my aesthetic, I think, is it's not contemporary. I mean, this is a classic, I think, design. I've recently started, when describing my tools, excuse me, they're timeless, traditional hand tools.
Yeah, they'll last a long time.
Yeah.
There's something really nice about that, and maybe it's only because of the circle we roll in that you see so much of it as things going back to how they once were, like not trying to reinvent.
Yeah.
Going back to how it was, and I do think more of that stuff will outlast. Maybe we just see it because that's the optic we look through.
Right.
But it really excites me when I see more of it, like going to see Alex Pole or going to see, anybody. They're making things, and there's a reason these things are still there. There's a reason these things last, because they just work.
Right. Right.
And there's something really nice about that.
And another thing that I did before this, when I was still teaching, another hobby I had, I would restore fiddles.
Okay.
Yeah. And I remember one day I was teaching 6th grade, and the kids, they learned that they could get me off on a tangent.
Oh, okay. They're clever.
And they got me off on a tangent one day. I mentioned something about working on a fiddle. They're like, what are you talking about? And I explained, I've got this old violin that I'm going to take apart and restore, and why don't you just throw it away and get another one?
No.
And I mean, they don't know any better. And I explained to them. And the concept that you could take something that was broken and make it workable again seemed really foreign to them. And that kind of broke my heart a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hear that. I think that's a huge thing. People not realising things are repairable. We do live in a throwaway society.
Yeah, designed obsolescence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Although,
It can't really be obsolete, can it?
yeah, I mean, until you wear it down
To nothing, which
to
is
nothing.
more than
mean-
a lifetime,
Yeah.
Again, the pieces can be separated, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, yeah. Work with your hands.
Yeah. What is it about the lathe that you found so? What is it that really caught you about the lathe, or what for other people?
There's a combination of things. I like fixing things more than I ever knew that I did, So again, the original lathe I had, it was belt drive. So the motor was back here, and I had to figure out the tension and in the this and the that and the. So that was initially really fun. And I'm an old soul. I like the fact that it was a 80-year-old lathe, and it worked. And again, it was the tactile feel. I do the same thing. I mentioned just chucking up a piece of, or putting a piece of wood in the vise and planing for planing's sake. I'll do the same thing on the lathe. I'll come in here.
Sake, yeah.
Just what are we going to do today? What does this wood want? And practice. There's no, it's important to practice.
Oh yeah.
So we're obviously sat in front of the lathe, we're talking about the lathe, but what else goes on within the shop?
Because it's a lovely big shop.
It's a lovely big shop.
It is a dream shop for sure.
A lot goes on.
It's like
So
your
I make a
typical
lot of
day-to-day,
different
yeah.
tools. So I make the knives, the awls, marking gauges, sliding bevels, the winding sticks. I've made a couple of brass infill bevels. So that it's a sliding bevel, but it's brass with a wooden infill. So there's a lot that goes on in the shop on any given day. Some days I'm just in here prepping stock, whether it be getting winding sticks to the right dimension, roughing out or turning just a batch of handles. And some days, a lot of it is it's sometimes driven by what's going on with orders. You know, every once in a while I'll get an inexplicable bump in a particular tool.
Really?
Yeah.
And you're like, what's going on?
Do you make to order?
Huh?
You make everything to order?
For the most part, yeah. I try to have a handful of knives and stuff on hand, but I have learned the hard way, despite all the winding sticks you see over there, I generally make these by hand because it's easy for these to get dinged up.
Okay.
You know?
So you make them to order? Yeah.
I have a decent sized shop, but I don't have a lot of storage.
Yeah.
You know? So these are exclusively made to order. Those I'm making as inventory for a show I'm doing later this summer. So yeah, everything's to order. And like I said, sometimes I'll get this like inexplicable blip. I'm like, okay, so today's tri-square day.
Yeah.
I make tri-squares too.
Yeah.
Or today's marking gauge day. Because some of these, you know, like the marking gauges and the bevels, there are enough parts and enough steps in the process that you need to make them in batches. Mm-hmm. You know, it doesn't make any sense to make one sliding bevel because the setup of the tools, the making of the this and the that and it doesn't make sense to make one-offs.
Okay. Yeah, you have to be sensible about that production, right? Because you could just go down a rabbit hole and waste a load of time.
Exactly.
You are working for yourself.
I may have done that once or twice.
Tell me about shows. What's the show scene like over here?
It's pretty good. So the show that I'm going to this summer it's sponsored by an organization called Plain Wellness, which started, I think, 2 years ago. My friend Jamie Harpster started it, and their mission is to improve people's mental health through woodworking.
Okay.
You know? Mm-hmm. So they put on a lot of different classes. This is their first show that they're doing. But the whole idea is and Jamie works in mental health. That's his like full-time gig, but he's also a woodworker. And he found that, man, woodworking is just really therapeutic. So he thought, hey, man, what if we use this as a tool to help people get through whatever it is they're getting through?
Plain Wellness, it's called.
Plain Wellness, yeah.
Simple, isn't it?
Yeah. So there's a show outside of Pittsburgh this summer, and a lot of big names are going to be there.
Oh, yeah?
Lee Valley's going to be there. Lee Nielsen, Popular Woodworking Magazine, Fine Woodworking Magazine. I'm sponsoring it.
Nice.
So it's I'm really looking forward to it.
That'll be really good.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
You talk about big names, and we know that you know a bunch of people and a bunch of... We all obviously operate in similar circles. How do you, as a woodworker, because there is lots of woodworkers, same goes for blacksmith, how do you take inspiration without...
Looking at everybody else's work.
This is definitely going to come out wrong. How do you take inspiration without pinching inspiration?
Yeah. That's a good question. I don't know where this design came from.
Right.
I had a vague idea in my head, but it came out of my hands. Mm-hmm. So I don't think I've seen anything like this. Yeah. You know, a marking gauge is a marking gauge. Yeah. You can make the head a little bit differently. I'm very transparent about some of my tools. Some of my tools are reproductions of existing tools. Right. Like one of my marking gauges is a reproduction of the Stanley number 197. It's got an oval head, circular cutter, and I'm very transparent about that. It's my take on it.
Yep.
But you know, I think there's enough room in the market to find your own flavor, you know?
You can definitely see that that's you that's made it. It's got your own aesthetic, right?
Yeah. And again, I'm also very transparent about the notion that these are unapologetically unique. Yeah. Now, if you put two of these next to each other, you'll know that I made them. But if you look closely, you'll find some subtle differences.
Mm. And that's the beauty in handmade.
That's why it's handmade. It's why I have nothing against CNC machines. I have nothing against people that use lathe duplicators. But it's just not my gig.
It's not you, and that's cool, right? It's like different strokes for different folks.
Right.
How have you, presumably all your customers, by the fact that you make tools, are other woodworkers.
Mm-hmm.
How have you found their response to that uniqueness? Because so much of the world is indoctrinated to thinking, oh, well, this isn't the same as the last one I bought.
Yeah. They love it. Yeah. You know, I obsess, like particularly the winding sticks. So these are, well, like most of my tools, it's a hybrid process. I use both machines and hand tools. But the finished surface is always planed. Mm-hmm. It's hand planed. And again, these are blanks. They'll end up being tapered. So they'll taper from the top down to the bottom. Mm. And then, you know, the back I do by hand. And I am forever fearful that something's going to go out with a hand plane mark on it.
Okay.
Now, if I were buying something from me, I wouldn't care. I'd think, actually, can I show you something else?
Sure can, yeah,
check
absolutely.
this out. So,
your podcast.
Yeah. Where are you? So this is a hand tool. Eric Florup, he was a saw maker. Sadly passed away a little over a year ago of cancer. And this is what they call a legacy saw. So it's put together with parts that he made, but he wasn't able to complete in his lifetime. And my wife bought me this for my birthday. Oh, wow. And it's personalized here. But if you look at this horn,
it's off, isn't it? The radiuses are off, yeah.
It's not perfectly symmetrical.
That's fine,
though. I love that that's there because I know Eric's hands. I never got the chance to meet Eric.
Yeah.
When he started following me on Instagram, I thought, wow, maybe I'm onto something.
Made
here.
it.
Yeah. Or he liked something. And it's now I feel connected to him in the same way that I said somebody might feel connected with this, or I feel connected to my family by using this.
Yeah.
I think it's got a lot to do with like the personal branding and the story behind the people as well. Like you get to know them, and then there's the whole story about the tool. And like I think, you know, when makers post, they just post the product, but like you get to know the person behind the brand, don't you? And it's so much more. You've never, you know.
I think you're very right. I think you're absolutely on the money. I often think about some of the tools I use in the engineering practice, or say you're talking about grinder, like I go off on my DeWalt 54 volt grinders because it's like the only battery grinder you can lean on. But that's what I'm telling people. I'm like, you can lean on this battery grinder, or the big framing saw, like you can just rip through stuff. It's phenomenal. It acts like a plugged in one. But I'm not talking about like, oh, it's good because the guy that made it is really nice, and I had a couple of cool emails with him, and then, he was on the phone, and then we sorted all this. Like, there's no human connection there.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very statistical connection.
Right.
Which is a very engineered, statistical.
Right.
They talk about it a lot in bicycle sales and car sales as well. So Rolls-Royce are famed for doing this. One of Rolls-Royce's early adverts was a 20p piece balancing on the engine.
Yeah.
And it was about how smooth the car was.
Right.
It wasn't this is 24 valve, which makes it smoother, and this is the horsepower output. It was, look, you can do that. And I remember there used to be a washing machine advert as well in the UK that was a £1 coin, and it was like, look how smooth and quiet it is. It's not about, it's got this motor that does that output. It's a very feeling thing. Yeah. And that's something you don't get buying mass produced, that you do get speaking to people, right?
And to your point, I obsess about, is this good enough? And I don't say this to, I'm not making excuses for sloppy work. That's not the point.
Yeah.
The point is that handmade is handmade, and I do everything in my human, everything that I can to make sure that it's gorgeous when it leaves.
Yeah.
I've never had anybody complain. But I am terrified that there'll be somebody that sees, oh, there's a plane mark, or there's a this, or there's a that. And if they weren't happy, then fine, I'll replace it. But to your original point about people being so accustomed to things being perfect.
Perfect inverted commas.
Yeah, perfect in commas, or quotes. I mean, if you look at old furniture, and I think about dovetails, the dovetail joint. A lot of people obsess over how pristine their dovetails are. And I'm not criticizing that. There's a place for it. But when you think about the function of the joint, it's just that. It's functional. It needs to it needs to do what it needs to do. It shouldn't be sloppy. I'm not saying, don't care about what it looks like, but and I'll show you when we go back into the house. I've got a beautiful First Empire dresser in our dining room. It's veneered, not sure with what, but anyway, you pull the drawers open, and there's not a single dovetail that is identical to the other.
Yeah.
But unless you were looking for it, you wouldn't know it. Yeah. And the guy that made it, and I say guy because back in the day probably was a guy. He didn't care either. It needed to serve its point.
Is this joint good enough structurally?
Right.
If yes, continue.
Yeah, and to my eye, machined dovetails just don't look right to me because they are so perfect. And again, anybody listening to this, if they make their dovetails with machines, that's fine. Great. I don't, that's fine. Yeah. I'm not criticizing anybody. For me,
it's an interesting observation, though, isn't it? Because there's I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast before. There's a thing called the uncanny valley. Do you know what that is?
Yes.
If someone's face is too symmetrical,
I think you have,
it kind of puts you off as a person.
Yeah.
It's called the uncanny valley, and psychologists reckon it's like an old. Now, why it would be is you're going right down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, but it's an old survival instinct that when things are too perfect, or too symmetrical, or like too aligned, they're a bit odd.
Yeah.
Do you know that? And I wonder if that is the same thing when you look at furniture and you do see absolute perfection, machined perfection.
Right.
It doesn't feel as warm. Does that make sense? Like warm.
Absolutely.
Warm's maybe the best word to describe it, because I don't really know what I'm describing now, and everyone listening's like, he doesn't know what he's talking about, and I don't. That's correct. But there's definitely, like, you look at old furniture, and I'm thinking we just stayed with Thomas Boucher and his family, and some of the old colonial furniture and stuff they had. It's just gorgeous. Yeah. And some of the furniture, like your mum's a good furniture picker.
Yeah, she is.
And some of the stuff, like, it's good. Still a little bit peeved that she let those side tables go when she sold the house. I never got them.
But you're not annoyed with that, are you?
But I'm not going to bring it up again, if you're listening.
And you know what got me really thinking about this? Magazine that you guys should, if you don't know about it, Mortise and Tenon magazine. So they have a podcast too. And one time they did a podcast, and the title of it was Tool Marks Tell Stories.
Oh yeah.
Nice, like that.
Yeah. And they were talking about just that, how you go into, I'll get the name of it wrong, but they went into some museum somewhere, and he had the opportunity to examine a piece. And, you look at the unfinished surfaces, and you see the tool marks, and you can make you can create a better understanding of how it was made, and that really stuck with me.
I love it sometimes when you see the pencil marks here and there. Yeah. You're just like, someone's actually made it,
And I've got old hand planes here that still have the layout marks on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
And some people, when they make their dovetails, they'll leave the marks, the witness marks. Yeah. And a lot of people would be put off by that. But
it was like that.
I dig it.
Yeah, the ceramicist we met in Australia, somebody had received her cup with like a hand mark on it, and she thought, well, I did make it, so like that's kind
Of
of
course, there's a
my
hand
point.
mark on it.
But they
I had
didn't
to
like
pick it up
it.
at some point. You know, it's like,
right.
They didn't like it, so they were like, "Can I get a new one that doesn't have a hand mark on it?" I'm just like, "Well, that's kind
Probably
of
not.
like the story is there." It's
Yeah.
like, but you know,
I often think this about my. I've got an old race truck that I'm slowly building, will never finish, haven't touched in years in the garage, and most of the geometry calculations for the suspension is written on the roof of the truck in a paint pen, and I often think, if I was to finish this, I think I would just lacquer over that.
yeah.
Like I would just keep it there.
Rather.
Oh,
I wouldn't paint over it. I would just
God, no.
lacquer the top of it just to keep it, because
yeah.
it's a bit like the Rain Man meme where all the like geometry's going around. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's like the roof of what the truck looks like. I mean, I'll never finish it because I've got a billion and one other things to do, and I keep saying I'm going to skip it. But tool marks definitely do tell stories. Setting out marks. You see a lot of, you know, traditional Japanese joinery, and when when you look at them laying out, you often think, I hope they leave that there when they erect the house,
Yeah.
because it's just
Yeah.
stunning.
And I'll show you this in the house too. There's a secretary in our front room that Joanne and I bought however many years ago. And I've been looking at the bottom skirt for however long we've had it. And there are two pieces that come up like this, and it should come to a point. And I see the layout lines, but there's no point. It comes like this and then goes across.
Interesting.
And I'm like, what's going on? I finally got down on my hands and knees, and it turns out that the actual carcass of the secretary, he didn't lay it out right. So if he had gone up to that point, you would see the carcass behind it.
Okay.
Okay.
So, but the layout lines are still there. I love it. I mean, you know, I don't know how old this piece is, but the tool marks tell stories.
It's undeniable that someone's made that.
Yeah.
Undeniable.
Undeniable.
Because we've been into the aircall factory and stuff, and a lot of it is automated now, and you just wouldn't get those mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing we all look at. I talk a lot about this with the engineering side of the work I do, and early in my career I'd get really pent up by mistakes. And you're like, nah, mistakes are mistakes. Like, they're there for learning. Like, we all look at mistakes as real negatives.
Yeah.
And they're negative to some respect, and obviously if they play out in a negative manner, they can be really negative, especially if they're safety critical or whatever. But if they're just tools for learning, they're just tools for learning.
Right.
I bet you the guy never done that wrong the second time
Yeah.
when he made that mistake.
I remember one other time when I was teaching, first day of class in 6th grade. I think it was the biggest class I ever had. And we were all sitting around in our little morning circle. And at some point I said to them, the most important thing that you guys do this year will be to fail.
Nice. I like that.
And they looked at me like I was insane. And I said it again. And they said, what are you talking about? And I said, we're not born knowing everything. We're not born with all the answers. I don't have all the answers. You are going, and I was very transparent with my kids. I said, you will see me make mistakes. If I'm teaching math, you will see me make a mistake.
Yeah.
Not my wheelhouse. But I'll catch myself. But, you know, I think the competitive nature of how we live, the need to know the right answer right away, fueled by the need for immediate gratification. I saw that a lot with kids, particularly, you know, the more gifted children that were used to getting it like that. They didn't have the frustration tolerance. If they came up against something that they didn't get right away, they'd fall apart.
Yeah.
But
There's no
That's me when I don't get something straight away. I'm like, why
there's
don't
no
I
grace
understand that?
there. Yeah.
But you know, we're unkind to ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, and I the other thing that's I'm kind of all over the map here, but I've learned so much about myself through this work. I am a different person as a result of being a woodworker. When I first started doing this, when I had the little shop in the garage, if I made a mistake, I would go into a rage. Throw something across it still happens rarely. But, you know, you just learn to be kind to yourself. And I'm wicked hard on myself.
Likewise.
Very, very self-critical. And I have recently got into the habit of acknowledging good work.
Nice.
And actually saying out loud, "That's good work, Adams."
I had to have Kate on, I hope you don't mind me sharing this on the podcast. I had Kate on the phone the other day turns out shipping a magazine around the world is really, really, really difficult, right? Really difficult, really costly. Actually don't make anywhere near the money that people think you make. Like I said to you earlier, most of the world we lose money sending magazines to, but that's part of the game and that's the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
And there's method to that madness. I had to have Kate on the phone the other day, like, tell me you're doing a good job.
I was like, I can't say I'm doing a good job.
Tell me you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
And like, you're not getting off the phone until you tell me you've done a good job. Like, it's really important to be able to tell yourself you're doing a good
so
job.
Hard.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I've also been there where Kate's also phoned me and I'm losing it over something and she's like, you're doing all right.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
We're
you
just
have to be reciprocal.
Like, yeah. We just tell ourselves, like, the bad always overcomes the good, and it's so hard to turn that around.
Yeah.
You know?
And the flip side, I was making a prototype for a panel gauge about a year ago. I've never gotten around to actually selling any. But anyway, it was one of those things where I had gotten one dimension in my head, and it was locked in. It was at the end of the day, I was going to put everything together. I was going to put the beam into the head of the marking or of the panel gauge. And when I put it together, I'm like, this is not right. This looks wonky. I mean, it fit, but that number that I had in my head all day was completely wrong. And the beam was comically small. And it was at the end of the day, and like I said, there was a time when I would have risked breaking a window, throwing that thing across the... And instead, I just laughed.
Yeah.
I said, you
need to be able to do that.
You have to.
And the thing is with, like, prototypes are prototypes.
Right.
There's a reason a prototype's a prototype. There's a reason it's not a final production model.
But, you know, again, there's always... I'm bad about this. Particularly with social media, you want to put your best foot forward. But I have also found that when I have shared mistakes, either on social media or on YouTube, people resonate with that, you know, because we all make them. And social media is an illusion, you know.
It's a highlight reel.
It's a highlight reel. And I need to take my own advice and
we all do.
and show more mistakes.
Yeah.
Because nobody's perfect, man. I mean, and that's the thing. We're human. To be imperfect is to be human. And to think that everything that a human creates is going to be perfect, nonsense.
What is perfection? I don't know the truth to this. I've definitely recited it as if it's gospel, but I don't know the truth to this. Apparently, the Japanese language doesn't have a word for perfection. No. I've definitely repeated that as if it's gospel, and if there's anyone listening to this that says no, it's probably not true. But I like it, so I'm rolling with it, right? Because it's cool. It's the fact that, like, what is perfection? Like, define it.
Right.
Talk to me a bit about social media.
Social media?
Yeah. Or what it is for you.
What is it for me? Wow. Well, I mean, fundamentally, it's community. You know, again, I started out mostly through Facebook of meeting other makers and getting that kind of encouragement.
Is this prior to you doing it full time?
No. I really my diving into the woodworking groups. Well, yeah, I guess I was doing it before I was doing this full time. But definitely, since I became a tool maker, it's the community, you know. And there's the business aspect of showcasing your tools, but it's also connecting with people. you know, social media is one of those things that's, I don't always know how to use it, and I don't always understand why. You know, you probably had this experience too. You have something that you're going to post on Instagram that you think is going to be an absolute banger.
Yeah.
Flat.
Absolutely flops.
And anything you spend 2 minutes or 2 seconds on, it's like the best thing that's ever happened all month. And you're like, how does that work?
Yeah.
Please tell me.
And I think I need to, I tend to be too polished with some of my posts. I want to share more process, like videos and images. But there again, there's okay, if I'm going to do that, I got to set up the camera, I got to set the timer, or I got to do this, or I got to do that. And I catch myself saying, I don't have time for that. I've got to get to work. Well, it is part of the work.
It is. It's the unfortunate reality. It is part of the work.
Yeah. I mean,
our business wouldn't be here without it.
I mean, making these little ferrules for the knives, you know, and this was an early lesson that I taught myself. I'd find myself making these and saying to myself, I got to get to work. It is the work.
Yeah, of course it is, because without that, you can't.
That's really true.
You can't be doing, I mean, it's all part of the work.
Yeah.
We do that, though. Like, it's a good point, because we do that. You'll be sitting answering emails for hours, or you'll be doing, and we're both bad for it. Like, we need to get back to work because you've got this other task in your head that you wanted to get done. But it's absolutely part of the work.
Yep, that's very
true. I'm on at 5 a.m. sitting doing shipping stuff, thinking I need to get back to work.
Yeah.
Or I'll be inside on the laptop and thinking, I gotta go to work, but I am doing work. You know, it's either working on the website or social media, or it's all part of it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you manage all those parts of it?
Poorly.
You personally.
Poorly.
Well,
we're not the only ones.
I mean, I've got the attention span of a gnat, so I tend to, my brain, a lot of the times I feel like my brain is going faster than my body can. And I know makers will resonate with this. I will have something in my hand and I will put it down, and then I will spend 15 minutes trying to find out where I put it. Because again, my brain is it's like I'm going 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 steps ahead.
Yeah.
And I don't even realize I put it down.
Yeah, I'm bad at starting one thing and then something else pops up and I do that and then I go back to that and then something else pops up and I'm like, oh, but what was I doing before that? Yeah, it's just, there's so many moving parts with the business, isn't there?
And Joanne has started, she does all the books now, that she's retired, and that's way more in her wheelhouse than mine.
It's important to know what to hand off.
Yeah, and I'm a control freak. I mean, and there's nobody I trust more than Joanne, you know. So and I know that the books will be right if she's doing them.
Yep.
I know that if I do them, they'll be right-ish, and the right-ish isn't good enough.
No, it's not.
So yeah, like you say, you got to pass it off to the people that are good at it. I've just started working with a marketing agency because to social media. I've done some advertising on Google. I've done some advertising on Meta. And there are aspects of both of those platforms you get so far, and then they start speaking a language that is just completely foreign to me. Mm-hmm. And they'll tell you perfect example. I posted, I was doing some advertising in Meta, got it all the way to the very final step. And before I was about to publish it, this warning light comes up and it says, this will not post to this, that, and the story platform or reel. And
different resolution, different crops,
Yeah, and I'm like, it tells you what's wrong. It doesn't tell you how to fix it. So am I going to spend a day messing around with that when I've got orders that despite knowing that is part of the work? So, I mean, I've made the conscious decision that I need somebody whose skill is in working in social media and working in Google and knowing that, yep, it's going to cost me some money, but it's also going to free me up to do what I do best, and that's making tools.
It's an investment, isn't it?
It's
And
an
these
investment.
things, the costing you money is an interesting one, isn't it? Because it should, if they do their job right, it shouldn't cost you money, it should make you money.
Yeah.
But you still see money going out, and a lot of us have this, not everyone, but a lot of us have this small business mindset where it's reduce costs, reduce costs, reduce costs. It's not always.
Yeah.
It's spend more to make more.
It can seem like a risk, but
It
like
can seem like a risk.
these things just take time to build, you know.
They
You
do.
can't instantly just put an ad on and expect it to work. Like you have to
Right.
train it and you have to understand it, and yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into it.
And the other thing, I mean, this, again, this space was a hobby. So I have built the business as it has just evolved.
Yeah.
So, you know, looking back, what if I had gone into this intentionally, like, I'm going to become a tool maker, I would have done things differently. I would have invested differently. I would have put way more into capital to begin with. But, you know, you learn along the way.
You also don't have a blueprint for how to become a toolmaker or how to become
No.
the toolmaker.
No.
Because we certainly don't from a magazine point of view. And we often think that, like we obviously launched subscriptions 2 years ago. We went quarterly instead of biannual. We used to have a biannual thick book, which you can still get as part of the mystery bundle for anyone listening at wearemakers.shop. But the moving to subscriptions like completely changed our business. It also changed your workload because you were doing. We do more per year now because you have more pages, but it's split into 3-month lumps, so they're less about, like, we just did not know that, and we would never have known that unless we'd done it.
Yeah.
It's all part of the journey. There isn't any blueprint for this. I mean, yes, you can, of course, you can look at other people that have done toolmaking in the past, but the
that's
world,
them.
that's them,
Yeah.
yeah. And the world in which they have done it successfully has changed. We couldn't look at National Geographic's business plan from whenever they started in the 50s or something like that and be like, that's how we're going to do it. We're going to get the 1.8 million subscribers. Like, it doesn't work like that.
It's
You
your
have
own
to do
journey.
you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it is you, and as you said at the start of this, it's your name above the door.
It's my name, and it's going to be mine, you know?
It's going to be yours. Have you ever thought about the size of it, the growth of it, someone else coming in? How does that look for you? Just it's yours. Happy with that size? Will you always maintain it at a size that it's yours?
The only possible way that I could see this going beyond me is if my son decided that he wanted to become a woodworker, but he's in Nevada. He's got his own life. He's getting married this fall. And that's okay. My legacy would be to pass this on to, I mean, it's the people in the UK and Australia and the States that I've sold to. You know, that, you know, I recently, well, within the last 2 years or so, I've had these custom blades.
Yeah, I was going to ask
and it's
you.
got my maker's mark on it, so it's got my name on it, so I don't have to stamp it anymore. But yeah, and I even hesitate to use the word legacy, but my footprint in the making community will be the tools that have my name on them. You know, you look at, you know, some of these tools, some of these old wooden planes and things, they've got their maker's mark. I mean, this design is very intentional. I mean, it's intended to kind of evoke the feeling of the stamps that you see on old wooden planes. And you know, I find old planes. I'm like, all right, who's this guy? You know, it's a lesser known maker. And then you go through down that rabbit hole and you figure out who they were, where they lived. You know.
But presumably with the mindset that you've brought to this, where there is things that you can offload, you could still get a lot done if you were just doing the tools, isn't there? Because, I mean, your legacy is you making the tools, but that's not to say you don't have Joanna doing the books, you don't have you know, somebody doing the marketing, you don't have somebody doing like general media content or something like that, isn't it? Like,
and I want to be very clear. I could not have done this without Joanne. You know, because it came at a time where I left teaching very abruptly. You know, and it was I could not have done it without her support and blessing and understanding that we didn't know what the next step was going to be. But she trusted me and she had faith in me.
Yeah.
You
That's
have to
good.
bet on yourself, don't you?
You do.
Yeah.
You have to bet on yourself.
I mean, even let me talk about the Maker's Mark. When I first got the stamp for my winding sticks, and she would tell you this. She said, why do you need that? And then when she saw it, she understood.
Yeah.
We have different skills and we complement each other. Yeah. I've got the vision, like I say, when I turn the lathe on, I can visualize what I want it to be.
Yeah, right.
Whereas when I go to the metal lathe, that involves some maths that I use it as a tool, but I'm not a machinist. You got to know where your strengths are. Yeah. I'm a maker.
And are your strengths in going to talking exactly about the lathe that you just brought up there? Something as quotation marks simple as the handle design. Are you a sketch-based maker, or you just rough it out and see what comes?
I'll tell you a story.
Right, okay.
So when I was getting my master's degree to become a teacher, Joanne and I we weren't married yet. So I was working through my master's thesis. I wasn't working at the time. And she came home from school one day and I had all my papers laid out on the kitchen table, research papers and what have you. And, she came in and fumble.
Yeah, quite.
She came in and said, how's your day? What'd you do? And I told her about the research I'd been doing. And she just kind of offhandedly said, where's your outline? What does your outline look like? And I showed her because I had to have an outline because, somebody said that I have to have an outline. Yeah. So she said, so where are you on this? I said, I'm not following that. I'm just letting the research take me where it will. And I mean, that's not her. I mean, she's a list maker. So that is to say, I'm not a sketcher, really. I mean, the exception to that is when I get over to that side of the shop and I'm using machining tools, I need to have sketches because there is math involved and I need to think through the order of operations. This, it's more intuitive.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's clever.
So you did start this quite late on, start being a tool maker.
You saying I'm old?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
You're older than me. However, I did get told today that I was looking really old, which was
there you go.
Really nice for someone who's just the other side of 30. But anyway, I will text them back later. Yeah. How would this be different if you'd started it earlier? I'm always really interested in, because I don't think there's a right or wrong, the people that have started it from like straight out of school versus other experiences leading into,
Yeah. I don't know that I can. Life brought me here.
Yeah.
I remember early on in kind of my professional life, like post college, I remember realizing that the more I tried to plan something to happen, the more likely it was to get screwed up. If I pushed too hard for something like a career move, or it wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
It's more organic.
I think it would be different if my dad had been a tool maker.
Yeah.
And I'd seen, or if I came from a long line of woodworkers, if I had like a grandfather who had, I had all his tools, it might look different because then there is that kind of generational connection. Even if they were just a hobby woodworker, but you've got their tools, there's that wanting to live up to
the name, because it usually is the family name on the door, isn't it?
Right. So it would be different if the circumstances were different.
Yeah.
But this is
It just found you.
This is as organic as it can be.
Yeah. And you're really comfortable with that.
I love it.
Yeah. It's interesting you talk about the the lineage. I'm often, and I don't think I should be, but I'm often really jealous of that when I see people who's like fathers and grandfathers and grand-grandfather. I'm like, oh, imagine growing up in that family. Like that's the. But obviously, you only see the highlight reel, and I'm very aware of that. And I don't think you should be jealous of it, but man, it looks romantic. It looks good, doesn't it?
It does look romantic.
It does look really good.
It's a bit like Thomas, whose dad's been doing it.
His dad, yep.
So he then did it, and he's always been grown up in like that. And now he's taken over his dad's business, but he's also doing his locks. So he's kind of got that.
When you see George tomorrow, I don't know his story, Pat, but his father, his father was the chairmaker.
Yeah, right.
So there is that generational connection for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And as I say, I think it looks more romantic than it probably is, but I think the underlying theory is just the exposure to it.
Yeah.
Like being exposed to it. And I think that's maybe what a lot of people are missing right now, and probably
that's why it's so important at kids' age to like be creative.
Yep.
And it's so important.
You look at the Norwegian schooling system, and it's just like
crazy.
hammer and nails at age 3 kind of thing,
Yeah.
They are making things, like they're obviously just like arts and craftsy things, but they're making things and presumably getting that sense of this was nothing a couple of hours ago and now it's a thing.
Yeah. And that's so important.
So much fulfillment in that too.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's why we are seeing. I don't think we're seeing a resurgence of I think we're maybe seeing a modern day resurgence of making and handcrafted stuff. More people turning to it because there is more exposure on Instagram, and why a lot of makers are doing classes and they're doing courses, and they're doing really well doing that because people want to. Again, we talk about Shannon and Bill Oyster all the time. They've got. Their classes are just stacked out week on, week off till. Christ, we've not spoken to them in a few months. It's probably till 2050 at the moment.
Yeah.
It's just crazy, and they're making bamboo fly rods.
Yeah. Wow.
I've never fly fished. I want to go and do a fly fishing course.
Yeah.
I've got no use for it. I mean, they look cool,
but it's fun.
Yeah, exactly. It's exposure. It's exposure to the putting your hands on things, doing the fun, and finding out that it is fun. Right.
I want to try this.
And and not everything has to be a business. You can still have it as a hobby.
Yeah.
Right.
Not everything you do has to turn into a business.
And I'm glad you said that, because another thing I need to guard against is I've got, I don't know, I should know this off the top of my head, but I've got X number of tools that I sell now, marking gauges, marking knives, and I need to guard against doing too much, And part of it, like I got an email from somebody a couple days ago asking if I'd ever thought about making dovetail markers.
Right.
I made some once when I got the milling machine. Yes, I've thought about it. Does it make sense for me to add them to my inventory? No. Might I get a wild hair someday and make a batch of them?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But like that little handle right behind you. So the story behind that, a guy contacted me a couple months ago and said, hey, well, I want one of your awls, but it needs to be the handle needs to be a specific size to fit in this specific spot in my tool chest, my tool cabinet. And I'm like, okay. So I looked at the original birdcage awl handle and I couldn't shrink it down just because it would have looked wonky. The proportions wouldn't have been right. So this I came up with as it was a hybrid between. So this is one of the first little screwdrivers I made, handles I made. So it's just kind of a marriage of a couple of different ideas. So I made this as a one-off for him, and now they're the Honey Brook #2 birdcage awl.
Nice.
Which is nice, but I have to guard against, I have to guard against making everything available all the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's the fear, I get fearful that if I take whatever down off the website, are people going to think, oh God, he's not making those anymore? I might be giving myself too much credit, but I don't want to create the appearance of scaling back. And maybe the mistake, if you want to call it a mistake, was, putting everything up there to begin with. I don't know. But I'm also transparent about the fact that everything's made to order. And, generally speaking, my lead time is a month, which is pretty good.
That seems pretty good, yeah.
From the time you place the order until it leaves the shop. Sometimes it's longer. And when it's longer, I freak out and I email the customer and say, hey, I'm going to miss this. Sometimes it's by a day and I freak out.
Yeah.
Because I don't want people to be disappointed. But by and large, I can count on one hand, half of one hand, the times that I've had somebody complain about how long it's taken. And mostly, honestly, it's because they didn't read far enough on the website to see that there's
People don't read.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
But I get it.
Yeah.
We are now trying to program on our website a physical tick box that will not allow you to check out when you've bought a subscription unless you've ticked it.
Yeah.
Because
I need to do something similar to that.
Yeah. Because people will buy a subscription. Like, say if you buy a subscription now, for example, but you don't buy a magazine with it, you just buy a subscription. So you're just registering your card details for a subscription. It won't come out for 3 months.
Right.
The £14.40 won't come out for 3 months for your next edition. Unless, of course, we've had a conversation and you want to backdate it to 1st of May and then you get the most recent one. All fine. But a lot happens in someone's life in 3 months. And you definitely don't remember the subscription. You just see this £14.40 coming off.
Right.
So I get it. But we feel we definitely need something that's more than just the bold text that's all over the website. And it does say literally everywhere, right through to the last cart. It says exactly where it is.
But you learn that that's just not enough and you need to make it clearer, you know?
And I don't think that's, as frustrating it is, I don't think that's a criticism of the person buying it. It's a criticism of the world we live in and how busy it is.
Yeah. People are busy and they worry about, what's this coming out of my checking account or why is this, it's understandable.
Yeah.
Especially when you get so many banking notifications on your phone these days. And let's be honest, there is so many scams out there.
Right.
Yeah.
We've obviously had people getting charged duties, which they shouldn't have been charged, and we're getting to the bottom of that. But a lot of people just, when I've emailed them to say, hey, you might be one of the small handful that got duties, they're like, oh, I thought it was just a scam, because there is so many scams out there.
Yeah, and you're battling all these things with the business as well, aren't you?
And then the other side of it is so many people are used to, ourselves included, used to Amazon Prime where it comes next day. Right. So a month feels like, whoa.
Yeah.
We don't really plan as people very much, do we?
Well, and there's that instant gratification thing too,
Yeah.
I'll date myself. I mean, when I was a kid, it was high school. Your favorite band was coming out with an album. You had to wait for the album to get to the record store. You had to find a way to get to the record store to get it, and then get it home, unwrap it, put it on the turntable, and
I think
there was that whole build up. Yeah. And then you had the physical, the liner notes, and now you just download it.
Yeah, I know.
Which is,
it's convenient.
Yeah, it's convenient, but
there's nothing better than getting something through the post that's just like.
That's what I love about the magazine. Is it's tangible. And I hesitate to call it a magazine because
and also does everybody, and I'm just like, I don't know how else to tell.
Yeah,
like, what is
but
it?
I've got them up in my bookshelves in the bedroom. Yours right next to Mortise and Tenon, because they're the same quality. It's like I liken it to what you would see like an academic journal being printed.
Yeah, that's what it was for me. Like it has to be an academic journal type thing. Yeah. And you were really conscious of that, Kate, at the start. Like, if we're going to do this, it has to last.
We studied product design, so like it had to be a product in itself, not just.
It had to be an ode to the people who are in it. Like, it has to be a physical thing.
Well, and that's the thing. You were saying earlier that the idea of fixing something is just so foreign to people, or designed obsolescence. I think it's important that what I do is I'm building for the future. I'm not building for just now. I'm building for it to last. And your publication is the same thing.
We hope so.
No,
we really hope so.
It's not something you chuck in the bin, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Yeah.
It's a proper coffee table one, isn't it?
Yeah. I like that 'cause a lot of makers do. They build for the future. They're building something that's going to outlast them by a long shot, you know?
Right.
That is their legacy.
Yeah.
When they're not longer here, that still is.
Right.
I guess when you go anywhere, you look at like, that looks handmade, and you look at it to try and find the maker's mark. Yeah. And then you go and Google who they are. That's what I loved it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When you go to a restaurant, you're like, these plates are nice. Are they handmade? We're those kind of
Kate's
people.
nearly spilt a few cups of soup looking at it.
Yeah.
But we are absolutely those people, and then you look for maker's marks. You look like a maker's mark is so important. Alex Pohl's blacksmith book that I recently read, that I'm harping on to everybody about. It's got a page at the back that's just maker's marks. And they're fantastic.
Yeah.
And even like the Gransfirth Brook, Kate bought me a Gransfirth Brooks axe for my 21st with TT on the end of it. And so Gransfirth Brook, each of the smiths that work under Gransfirth Brook, so they all all put their initials on the end of it.
Yeah.
And then we were having a conversation with Alex Pohl, who studied out there, and TT was the brother or the nephew of the master smith that taught him. And it's like all these maker marks, they create a little lineage through things. They've got a story within themselves.
Yeah.
You don't get that with Made in China or ISO 9001, you know?
No.
It's not the same, is it?
Yeah, no. And that's why I say, does this go anywhere else? Does it get bigger? No.
No, you're quite happy with it, just being you.
And the other thing too is this is, as I described, I've gone through a lot of different careers, and life has been quite a journey for me. Yep. And this is me. Yeah.
Nice.
This is me. As much as I liked music, my dad was the high school. He was the music teacher. Mr. Adams. That was him. I needed to step out of that shadow. And this is, I can't say it any more clearly. Yeah. This is me.
Yeah.
I think that's something really important, that whether it's in making or whether it's something else, like people should find themselves, like truly themselves, not something, I don't know if it's something I've done all the way yet. I don't know if it's something most people I speak to have done all the way yet, but people find who they are out of external influence.
Yeah.
Like this is, if there was no other person on the planet and there was no other societal pressures and there was no other, financial pressures, like what would I do?
Right.
And then find that and make that your job. Because I think you'd be pretty happy.
Yeah, I think you would.
I think you really, really would be pretty happy.
Right.
So with all this in mind, and obviously we just talked a lot about lineage and quality tools, is that something you were always aware of though? Because obviously you had I hesitate to call it high flying because I don't know enough about the job, but you had the more corporate job and then the teaching. Were you always into high-end quality goods, or were you exposed to that?
Yeah.
Presumably from music you'd be exposed to that, right?
Yeah, a couple things. My grandfather, he was a farmer in Kentucky, and I remember just as a little kid him saying, always buy the best tool that you can afford, So there was that. My dad, as a musician, you get the best instrument that you can. It does make a difference. You can't blame your tools for poor performance, but there's no lie. The better quality the instrument, the better your experience is going to be. So yeah, I've always been drawn. I've been drawn to old things. I am an old soul. My house growing up, I was surrounded by family furniture. I come from a long line of pack rats, and I don't think they threw out a piece of furniture ever, which ended up, it was nice, and I loved being around it because there were these tangible connections to family that I never met.
Yeah.
But there was that knowing that there is that connection. And yeah, there's something to be said for doing something very well for the sake of doing it very well.
Yes.
And
like that.
I've had a couple once or twice this week, or in the last week, I've had something I was about to box up, and it just didn't feel right. I'm like, nope, can't send that out today. And it's not because it wasn't perfect. It just, for some reason, there was something about the tool. It just didn't speak to me. It didn't feel right in my hand. So if it's not going to feel right in my hand, it might not feel right in the customer's hand. So I'm not going to send it out. It's just, I don't strive for perfection, but I strive to send out the very best tool that I can make.
Yeah, I understand. I understand that feeling. Yeah.
How did you come to that conclusion? Because everyone gets caught by the perfection trap, right? We all do as creatives. It's the thing. How did you come to the conclusion of it's the very best tool that you can make on that day or on that? Like what is the defining factor? Or maybe the question is more, how do other people understand that? Because there'll be other people listening to this thinking, yeah, I'm always trying to be perfect.
Yeah. Well, I would to the woodworkers that listen, let go of the perfection trap on your projects. Start cutting some dovetails by eye. Don't use a gauge. Give that a shot. It's fun. But I said earlier on that I think that we find inspiration in the tools that we use, and I think we find inspiration in beauty. And that too, I mean, going back to the furniture I grew up in, it spoke to me on a just aesthetic, a beautiful level. Even instruments, the instruments I played, I'm like, damn, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
So what is it? I can't put words to it, but I know when I see it that this is right.
Nice.
Yeah. And I've gotten some of that feedback from customers that have written, they send me an email and they say, it just feels right in my hand.
I think it's your gut telling you sometimes that that's not right.
I'm sorry?
Like your gut, your gut feeling saying that's just not right, so I'm not sending it out. Because something will come back and it'll be not right. Yeah.
Or, I've prototyped a couple tools that are just awful. I'm like, that is just awful. But I keep them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Don't chuck them away.
No.
They're part of the process, aren't they?
Yeah. Now, I've got a little video on my YouTube channel about keeping your mistakes. Yeah. Because I think it's important.
To remind you,
Yeah. We all make mistakes and keep them, I showed you these earlier. I mean, these are comically small. These are some of the first things I ever turned. But yeah, they're comically small. But this is where I started. Yeah. And
where you are now.
I'm not ashamed of them.
Mm-hmm. No.
They're still good tools. They still look good.
Because that and all this other stuff that surrounds us wouldn't be here had they not been here.
Right. Exactly.
They are still part of the process, aren't they?
Yeah.
Amazing.
I've just lost the question I was going to ask them.
Oh no. Try rewind it.
I know. It's a good one as well. Kate, I need to cut this out.
It's okay, you're allowed to make a mistake.
Yeah, right?
YouTube. Sorry, that's what I was going to ask you. Your YouTube. So you've done a YouTube. Really, really good engineer who's mentored me a little bit, and I've recently been able to work under him quite a lot. I'm sure it was him that said it to me. The best way to learn something inside out is to learn it, do it, teach it.
Yeah.
How has that portrayed in your YouTube career? Let's call it a YouTube career. You really took to the YouTube. I remember us having the first conversation about just try YouTube. It's pretty fun to do. You really took to it.
I took to it, and then I had hand surgery just about a year ago, and then so I wasn't able to make them for a while. And then one of my other kind of idiosyncrasies is I start feeling guilty and shame because I haven't done it in a while, and I'm like, it's been too long. I can't do it anymore. Then I just dive back in.
Yeah. Get back to the groove.
I mean, I enjoy it because it's another creative outlet, you know? Yeah. And it's one of those things that when I make the videos, I know that I'm going to make them. You know, it's, I set aside the time. I don't script it. It's all, you know, I say it off the top of my head.
Yeah. Yep.
I have a rough idea of where I want to go with it. The thing that I sometimes struggle with is, you know, what do people want to watch? You know, my most watched video is just an overview of all my tools. Just kind of an introduction to, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, the how I make them tools are very popular. You know, I do need to guard against, you know, this is my business, you know. And again, you know, people can learn how to make winding sticks. They can learn how to make, you know, I mean, I learned. You know, you can learn if you want, but I'm not in the business of teaching people how to do my business.
Yeah.
So, you know, I draw inspiration from questions I get. So I would like to do, next up, I would like to do really a short one on what are winding sticks and how you use them. You know, the 3-part series I did on the making of them is very well received, but I never explained how to use them. And I also I make the wrong assumption that the only people watching my videos are woodworkers.
Yeah.
You know, I watch stuff on YouTube of other makers that I'll never do it, but it's fascinating to me to watch.
I watched a 2-hour video of a guy making a teapot on his knees in sand in a Japanese workshop. Yeah. I ain't ever going to make a teapot out of sand, but like,
just the accuracy.
Man, it was good. It was good watch.
Right.
Real good watch.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting you talk about that winding stick thing. Something just popped into my head there. For your bit, like, doing a blog post on how to use winding sticks, I think would get you so much traffic.
Right. And
how to use the tools and how to do certain things, because people want to know. It would just immediately, as soon as someone Googles winding sticks, I mean, obviously there's levels to this. I'm not unaware that you can't just write a blog post and you'll be at the top of Google. Of course, there's things that you'd have to do, and you can speak to your marketing agency about that. But also, it's all driving people towards your business, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. I mean, as you're saying this, it all comes back to the marketing, the social media, the improving your whatever the Google overlords want.
Yep.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is I like writing, and I've been told I'm a good writer. So, but as I'm saying that, I'm thinking, well, then I need to think about how long this blog post is going to be. Is it going to be long enough, or is it going to be too?
Just write it.
I just need to write it.
Yeah, and then you can decide if it's too short or too long.
Yeah. Or you can part 1, part 2 it. Like, it doesn't matter, does it?
Right.
But yeah, I think I notice a lot of our traffic comes from, well, in our case, it's the newsletter. A lot of the older sold out editions, we shorten the stories and put them in a newsletter. And a lot of that is people reading it, and then it pumps, and then they're like, oh, I want to read more about makers, you know, and that works really well for us. So it's definitely something worth thinking about.
Yeah, and I need to think about that too. I have avoided, so I've got my subscribers list that I use for email marketing, and I use it very judiciously because I as a consumer am aware of how much stuff comes into my inbox. So I only use it when I have something that I really want to, not necessarily say, but if I've got something that I'm selling that hey, this is new, or hey, this is newly back in stock, or hey, this is a new wood. And I keep on hearing people say, you should do a newsletter. And I'm like, well, what am I going to write? But as I'm talking to you now, I'm thinking, well, I could do a newsletter that is just a short blurb on, hey, I just tell a story about my 8-hour drive to go get those. Yeah.
I love a What's on the Bench newsletter. See if someone's just sending a newsletter and like, this is what I worked on this week, because I won't have seen it on Instagram. I don't see most of the people that follow on Instagram. In fact, I found out the other week, if you tap the Instagram logo in the top left-hand corner, it will show you only the people you follow in your feed. Right? Nobody knows about that, right? Yeah, exactly, right? It's like the hidden feature of Instagram. I mean, it's probably not hidden, but certainly to me it was. I don't see most people I follow, but when I get an email, and I'll read it. Yeah. I'll 100% read it, and even if it's just like 300 words on what's on the bench this week.
Yeah.
You're just reminding your customers you're still there, not just when you're selling. Yeah.
And when one comes in the following week, I will if it was interesting what was on the bench this week, I will 100% read the next one. Right. And yeah, there may be times that I'll unsubscribe.
We get subscribed all the time. Yeah. But they were never going to be our customers, were they? They're never going to be interested, or
I'll unsubscribe from stuff, but I will resubscribe 3 months later. It's just because my inbox is mental at the time. I'm on a busy project, or we are running up to print, and I'm just getting hundreds of emails. We do unsubscribe and resubscribe.
We're going to set up just a Gmail for signing up to newsletters, so it's just its own account. So
basically my own social media feed that I can just go onto the emails and read them.
Yeah, basically. It's not a bad idea.
It's not. I do also like the way Beehive, who we use, does it, and the way Substack does it, where it's in-app. Mm-hmm. So on our Beehive, and we're still working on this, but one of the features of Beehive is, on our Beehive, we pay for quite a high-level Beehive. Not that it's expensive for what it gives you, but you can install the We Are Makers app, in inverted commas, and basically every time we post something on it, it would throw it up there. So we're still working out how we're going to use that, because it's not something that lands in your inbox, but we could basically publish it rather than publishing it as an email, we publish it as an app, and then it kind of gives your hardcore fans that want to download that onto their phone a bit more access. Right. So I don't know how that's going to look yet, but yes, the newsletter thing it's good. How you do it. I definitely do think as newsletters become more popular, they are going to start clogging up inboxes. So whether it's you have a different inbox for newsletters, right, or something like a Substack or Beehive, we prefer Beehive certainly, that it comes up as a notification on your phone rather than just a normal Instagram notification. But keeping in touch with customers, and when you're making stuff's cool. Yeah. If I'm sitting doing some analysis on something at work and I get an email from someone who's done something way more interesting with their hands on a bench.
You're like, I'm going to read that for 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'm like, that can wait, and I'll do this,
Yeah. And then I chase my head about, okay, as we're talking, all right, do I do a blog on my website? Do I open a Substack? Do I do a newsletter? This is the other thing, right?
There's too many options, right? Yeah, there is. It's information overload sometimes. Yeah. We haven't quite worked out which is
Nah, we've not. I really, really, really like Beehive because a lot of what it offers, even just a way to monetize it, like they find sponsors for your newsletter, and as a media company that's really important to us. We haven't done any yet because they're not really aligned with what we do. They'll be like independent news channels want to sponsor your newsletter, or
just random.
There's like a new sneaker brand or something, and that's not really aligned with us, right? You'd be reading it and be like reading about some cool independent glass maker or cool independent tool maker and be like, oh, it needs cheap trainers from somewhere. It just doesn't make sense. Yeah. But that kind of thing, like they do offer an ability to monetize something else, which, not that it's all about monetizing it, but it's definitely about continuing to give people the best quality content, and that does cost money. Yeah. So I don't know what the answer is yet.
And it's like you say, it's not all about making money. I mean, one of the reasons I want to grow is I want more people to know about handwork. Yeah. I want more people to know that, winding sticks are a thing. Yeah, you can use a hand plane. Yep.
Yeah. Having a mission behind stuff like that's the reason we want to grow. Like, we want to be able to offer grants to makers. We want to be able to offer all these things that people just aren't doing. Like, that would be really, really cool for us to get to that magical cut-off number, 2,500 subscribers, and then and more to be able to offer. Because I think you can make a real difference if you've got a good mission behind you. And whether that difference is just more people knowing about how to make things with hands, or what a winding stick is, or whether it's more people finding out about people like you, or George tomorrow, or
I mean, there's a lot going on in the world. And people need an outlet. Whether it's you know, playing golf, playing tennis,
Yeah.
being in a wood shop, you know, people need an outlet. And I know other makers want people to know that this is a thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
And it doesn't have to be an expensive thing.
Yeah.
You know? You can get into this pretty cheaply.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing that people need to talk about, because whenever you see these workshops, you think that there's, like even in your workshop here, there's a lot of investment gone into this, but you don't have to have all that investment to start.
But this is over time. You build it up, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, so when we bought this house, we had a fair amount of renovations that we had to do. One of the first projects I did, we didn't have if I remember correctly, the second floor was all carpeted. You know, we pulled it up, it was just plywood. So I put down it was reclaimed lumber, but it's wide pine floors.
Nice.
Why am I telling you this? One of the first two tools that I got was a Stanley No. 5 jack plane. And one of these up here, I'm not sure which one it is, but it's just a little block plane.
Yeah, okay.
And I mean, I think back in junior high school, I'd used a block plane. And I could get that working pretty well. I couldn't get a No. 5 to work at all. I just thought, what am I doing wrong? And I found Paul Sellers.
Yeah.
And learned how to sharpen it and how to set it. And it just wasn't set right. I mean, it's a tool. You got to learn what part goes where and why and how. And I don't know why I'm telling you that.
We're talking about people not knowing that they can do these things.
Yeah, you can do these things.
Yeah.
And again, YouTube University. I mean, you can learn very quickly about how to set a plane, and what I would do. I mean, if I had somebody walk in here today and say, "Hey, I want to learn how to use a hand plane," I would hand them one that was just all jacked up, and I'd walk them through restoring it.
Yeah.
Because if you know how it works, you'll know how to make it work.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's true.
There's something to be said for that. You know, I've got a couple of old wooden planes. I just found one that was buried.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten I even had it. And one of these Sundays I was in here just kind of having shop time, you know, not making anything, but I found it. I'm like, oh, this is cool. And I, you know, fixed up the blade and got it set, and now it's on my bench. I use it every day.
That's cool.
You know, and you just figure out how to do it. You figure out, and you ask for
Part of
help.
the adventure.
Mm-hmm. You know? Asking for help is a big one.
Asking for help is a big, and you know, again, I tell people, I'm very transparent. When you contact Honey Brook Tools, you're talking to me.
Yeah.
You know, my phone number is on the website, I think. My email definitely is. Mm-hmm. And I'm an open book. I mean, if somebody wants to ask me a question, ask me a question.
I think that's one of the most important things that Kate really pushed for and done a good job of with We Are Makers, is you directly link the personal brand to We Are Makers. Like, it's not just a magazine. If you email, you're emailing Kate directly, or
right.
If you text, you're texting me directly, or even the Shopify, when you go onto the website to order your magazine at wearemakers.shop, you when you type in a message to ask a question about, you know, is there a limit to how many magazines I buy because you want 500 subscriptions, which is fine. It prompts my phone. Like, it comes up as a text on my phone. It is directly to people.
Right.
And we're quite divorced from that, because if you message Amazon support, it's a bot that you're speaking to, you know, like, it's really nice that people can still speak directly to you. I think it's the way to do it.
Yeah.
If you could do anything and you knew you would not fail, what would it be?
Oh, dear Lord. As a tool maker?
Mm-hmm.
I thought you were going to say run away to Scotland.
Hand plane.
You'd make a hand plane.
Yeah. I'm fixing to. So All right, I can tell you another story. I like telling stories. So this is that plane I was telling you about.
Yeah, okay.
So hand planes are probably, they're definitely in the top 5 of my favorite tools.
What is it about hand planes? Because all very high-end woodworkers just love a hand plane.
Yeah.
It's the tactile feedback.
Yeah,
it's
okay.
the sound. It's the surface that you get.
Okay.
It's just, yeah. So, and for a guy that's my size, I have a great affinity for small tools. I don't know what it is, but this, I mean, it feels perfect in my hand. And, you know, I've fooled around. I've made a couple little hand planes. I've never been really satisfied with them. So on my list of things to do, partly because I need to do something for myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's important.
Yeah, I don't make enough for myself for the sake of making, so I want to reproduce this.
Nice.
Yeah, so I've got a little block of beech that I'm going to use. I got this iron that I haven't even opened, but got it from a friend. But I think, you know, if I were to go off into some kind of wild tangent,
Yeah.
it would be a plane, making planes, you know? I think they're fun.
Yeah. It's a nice project.
Yeah. There's no risk of there being a Honey Brook line of hand planes. To be clear about that. Because that's an art in and of itself.
Yeah, I think to BGS planes that we featured in an early edition now.
I think it was
Like,
version 40.
That's all he can. That's all he's got. Not all he can make.
Yeah.
All he's got the capacity to make is just plain. Yeah. And they're beautiful things.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're hyper specialised to do that
yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's your niche, isn't it? Your niche, if you call it in America.
Niche or niche.
And mine
Is it niche in America? It's niche.
I don't know. We speak a weird form of English. But my niche, notch, whatever, is layout tools.
Yeah.
You know, marking tools.
Yeah.
You know, that's my thing.
Mm-hmm.
So before Kate asks her closing question, her cracker of a question, if you could ask any other maker any question, you don't know who the maker is, what would it be?
Why? Why do you do this?
Nice. We'll ask George tomorrow why.
That's
Yeah.
exactly it.
Why?
That's what we're going to try and remember in doing this trip, is ask the next person.
We keep saying we're going to do that and then we forget.
I wrote them down all on a deck of cards.
We're so
because my
professional.
plan was to have it as a... Yeah, none of this is professional. Was to have a deck of cards of questions that different people had asked. It's the Diary of a CEO podcast does it in a book at the end, and I think he produced a set of cards off it. I think that's probably where I pinched the idea from. I just thought it was a really nice way to get because we speak to so many different makers of different mediums, different crafts, as Kate says, like, it's really interesting to see what makes people tick.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things I want to try. You know, I think back to junior high, we had a metal shop and wood shop. And I'll show you when we go back in the house. I made a little hammered metal bowl, a brass bowl. And I remember we had these big wooden stumps and it just had a dish in it and you just sit there and I want to do that again, you know, because it was fun.
Yeah.
You know?
Just do one for yourself. Just enjoy it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just endlessly curious, you know. I see these people that make brooms. I'm like, wow, that is cool. You're a broom maker.
Yeah,
that is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
I hear that.
You
I
know?
hear that.
Nice things.
Yeah.
It's just nice things, isn't it? Nice things that have had people's hands on them. It's great.
I just want to know why.
Yeah.
It's a good question. And what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, God.
Two hard questions.
I teared up when you asked me that. And I think it's because I never trusted myself. I never believed in myself.
Mm-hmm.
What would I tell my younger self? I think it would be to trust yourself and don't live your life trying to fulfill somebody else's expectations.
That's a good one.
You know, you're living your life. You're not living somebody else's.
Yeah.
And
It's an important one, yeah.
At the end of the day, you need to be happy with who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, you're not the job title on your business card.
Yeah.
I mean, in my case, I am. But, you know, yeah.
I think that's a good end.
Wrap it at that.
Good end.
Well, thanks so much, mate.
Where do
Really
where do people find you though? Like your website, Instagram, YouTube? Right there.
HoneyBrookTools.com.
Yeah.
And at Honey Brook Tools. What's my Instagram handle? Honey Brook Tools and Woodworks is both my IG and my YouTube handle.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. If it made you smile today or feel inspired, hit follow, leave us a review, or share it with a fellow maker. It really means the world. If you'd like to support what we do even more, you can subscribe to our quarterly print magazine, where you'll find even more maker stories in every edition. We'd also like to share that we're working on the We Are Makers grant. Once we reach 2,500 magazine subscribers, we'll be giving 11% of all our subscriptions directly to makers to help fund tools, travel, photo shoots, or anything that moves their craft forward. Find a link to all of this in our show notes. We'll see you soon, wherever the next story takes us.